The world narrowed to a single, impossible sound. It wasn't the cheerful chatter of the graduation party filling my backyard, nor the clinking of glasses raised in a toast to my grandson, Leo. It was the sound of my wife's voice, low and sharp in the sudden quiet of our kitchen, uttering a sentence that felt like a physical blow. "The money is gone, Robert." I remember staring at the refrigerator door, at a magnet shaped like a cartoon sun Leo had given me years ago. The magnet's cheerful, painted smile seemed to mock the sudden, freezing winter that had just descended upon my soul. This was the moment the carefully built structure of my life, the one I thought was made of solid oak and honest nails, was revealed to be nothing more than a house of cards in a hurricane. This was the beginning of the end. Before that moment, my life had been one of quiet contentment, built on a foundation of loss and resilience. My first wife, Sarah, was the great love of my life. We had built a world together, a small, perfect universe that revolved around our daughter, Clara. Sarah was sunlight and laughter, the scent of baking bread, and the comforting warmth of a hand in mine. When we lost her to a sickness that came on fast and cruel, the world went gray. I was left with a shattered heart and a 6-year-old daughter who had her mother's eyes. Raising Clara became my sole purpose. I poured every ounce of myself into being both father and mother. I worked my hands raw as a carpenter, a trade I loved for its honesty. You take a piece of wood, you shape it, you join it, and you create something strong and useful, something that lasts. There are no lies in wood. It is what it is. That's how I tried to raise my daughter, with honesty, with solid principles. We weren't rich, but our little house was filled with love, and that was more than enough. Clara grew into a wonderful woman, strong and kind, with her mother's compassionate heart and my practical sense. When she met her husband, Mark, and later gave me my grandson, Leo, my world, which had been rebuilding slowly, was suddenly flooded with color again. Leo, he was the second great love of my life. From the moment I held him, a tiny, squirming bundle wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, I felt a connection that was primal and profound. He was a continuation of Sarah, a living piece of the love we had shared. Watching him grow was like watching a miracle unfold in slow motion. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to skip stones across the lake, how to hold a hammer. He had a quick mind and a gentle soul, and from the time he was small, he was fascinated by the stars. He wanted to be an astrophysicist. He would spend hours with the telescope I bought him for his 10th birthday, charting constellations and dreaming of distant galaxies. It was for him, for that dream, that I started the college fund. The day he was born, I opened a dedicated savings account. Every week, without fail, a portion of my earnings from my carpentry business went into that fund. On birthdays and Christmases, instead of lavish gifts, I would show him the passbook, the numbers growing steadily. "This is for your future, Leo," I'd tell him. "This is for the stars." It became a sacred ritual, a tangible promise from me to him. I met Helen about 8 years after Sarah's passing. Clara was in college, and the house had become profoundly quiet. The silence, once a companion in my grief, had started to feel like a weight. Helen was a client. I was building some custom bookshelves for her elegant modern home. She was sophisticated, put together, and seemed to possess a confidence I found both intimidating and alluring. She was a widow, too, and we bonded over our shared experience of loss, or so I thought. Looking back, our conversations about it were always one-sided. I would speak of Sarah, of the gaping hole she'd left, and Helen would listen, pat my hand, and say, "I understand," but she rarely spoke of her own late husband. Her grief seemed more like a chapter she had closed and shelved, while mine was a book I kept by my bedside. Still, she brought a different kind of life back into my home. She redecorated, replacing my comfortable, worn furniture with sleek, minimalist pieces. She hosted dinner parties with her circle of friends, people who talked about stock portfolios and European vacations, a world away from my own. I felt a bit like a rustic piece of furniture she'd kept for character. Clara was wary of her from the start. "She just seems glossy, Dad," she'd said once, "like a magazine picture. I'm not sure what's underneath." I dismissed it as protective daughter syndrome. I was lonely, and Helen was a balm to that loneliness. We married in a small civil ceremony 2 years after we met, Helen knew about Leo's college fund from the beginning. In fact, she seemed to embrace it. "It's a wonderful, noble thing you're doing, Robert," she'd said, her voice smooth as polished marble. When we merged our finances, a move she had insisted on for simplicity and partnership, she suggested we move the fund into a higher yield investment account under both our names. To make it grow faster for him, she'd explained. I was a carpenter, not a financier. It made sense to me. I trusted her. She was my wife. The account was our shared secret, a testament to our blended family's future, or so I believed. The passbook was replaced by online statements she managed, assuring me everything was growing beautifully. And so we arrived back at the graduation. Leo, resplendent in his cap and gown, his face beaming as he accepted his diploma with high honors. I felt my chest swell with a pride so immense it was almost painful. Clara and Mark were crying happy tears beside me. Even Helen, standing elegant and poised in a cream-colored suit, dabbed a tissue at the corner of her eye. We hosted a party in our backyard, the one Sarah had planted with rose bushes that still bloomed every summer. The yard was filled with friends, family, the smell of barbecue, and the bright, hopeful energy of youth on the cusp of a new beginning. Leo was the center of it all, of course. He was talking animatedly with his friends about his plans for university, his chosen school, a prestigious one with a renowned physics program. He'd been accepted months ago. All that was left was the financing. Later in the afternoon, I pulled him aside. This was the moment I had been planning for years. I had a ceremonial oversized check I'd had printed, a gag gift to go along with the real thing. I also had an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000, what I called the final deposit, a bonus on top of the fund itself. "Leo," I started, my voice thick with emotion. "Your grandmother Sarah would have been so proud of you today. We all are. This is just a little something extra to get you started." I handed him the envelope. He opened it, his eyes widening at the number on the check. He threw his arms around me in a fierce hug. "Grandpa, I don't even know what to say. Thank you." Over his shoulder, I saw Helen approaching. Her smile was tight, her eyes darting from the check in Leo's hand to my face. A flicker of something I couldn't decipher crossed her features. It looked like panic. "Robert, can I speak to you for a moment?" she asked, her voice strained. She put a hand on my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She led me away from the party, through the sliding glass door into the kitchen. The sudden quiet was jarring. The sound of laughter from the yard seemed to come from another world. "What was that?" she hissed, her elegant composure cracking. "What was what?" "It's a gift for Leo. A little celebration bonus," I said, confused by her reaction. "I took it from my personal business account." She closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. You can't give him that." "What are you talking about, Helen?" "Of course I can." A cold knot began to form in my stomach. Something was terribly wrong. Her panic was infectious, seeping into the air between us. "We need that money," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We?" "Helen, it's my business account. It's separate. Besides, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the main fund. We can talk about the final transfer to the university bursar's office next week. I was thinking we'd go to the bank together with Leo." That's when she said it. She wouldn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on that smiling sun magnet on the fridge. "The money is gone, Robert." I felt the words, but my brain refused to assemble them into a coherent thought. It was like hearing a foreign language. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "It's an investment account, Helen. It doesn't just go gone. Did the market crash? Is that it?" My mind grasped for a logical, impersonal explanation. A disaster, but a shared one. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she usually feigned so well. They were the eyes of a stranger. I needed it. The knot in my stomach turned to ice. "You needed it? You needed Leo's college fund. What could you possibly need $500,000 for, Helen? A new car? A trip?" The sarcasm dripped from my tongue like acid. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, a flash of her usual imperious self. Then her face crumpled slightly. "It was for my son." The world tilted on its axis. "Your son? Helen, your son died in a car accident when he was 3 years old. You told me that yourself. It was one of the few spare details she had ever offered about her past, a tragic story that had made me feel a deeper sympathy for her. Sarda. She shook her head, a tear finally tracing a path through her perfect makeup. I lied. He didn't die. I gave him up for adoption when I was very young, long before I met my first husband. I stood there, speechless, my mind reeling. A secret son. All these years, a secret son. He found me, she continued, her voice gaining a desperate, pleading edge. He found me a few years ago. He was in trouble, Robert. He'd made some bad choices, gotten into terrible debt. He needed help, a fresh start. The pieces began to click into place with horrifying speed. The vague conversations, the charity work she was suddenly so involved in, the trips to visit an old friend in another state. It was all him. So you gave him Leo's future, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of calm that precedes a massive storm. You took the money I saved for 18 years, the promise I made to my grandson, and you gave it to a stranger. He's not a stranger. He's my son, my own flesh and blood, she cried, as if that explained everything, as if that made the betrayal righteous. You have Clara and Leo. I had no one. He's all I have from my past. I had to help him. I was going to pay it back. He was going to pay it back once he got on his feet. The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting, it barely registered. The only thing I could see was Leo's face, bright with dreams of stars and nebulae. I saw the passbook from all those years ago. I saw my late wife Sarah's smile. Every deposit was an act of love, every dollar a brick in the foundation of his future. And Helen had taken a sledgehammer to it all. Get out, I said. The words were gravel in my throat. What? Robert, don't be like this. We can fix this. It's a loan. We can talk to him. This conversation is over, I interrupted, my voice rising, the calm finally shattering into a million sharp pieces of rage. The party is for my grandson. I will not have you ruin it further. Go upstairs, pack a bag. I want you out of this house tonight. You can't be serious. This is my home too, she shrieked, the mask of the elegant victim falling away to reveal something ugly and grasping. You forfeited your right to this home when you stole from my grandson, I said, turning my back on her. I couldn't look at her anymore. I walked to the sliding door, took a deep breath to compose my face into a mask of grandfatherly pride, and stepped back into the sunshine of the party. But for me, the sun had gone out. A profound breaking point had been reached. In that moment, standing among the laughter and joy, I felt utterly alone. And in that solitude, a quiet, cold decision began to form. This was not over. This was just the beginning. I would not let her, or her secret son, destroy my family. I would burn her world to the ground to get that future back for Leo. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, a smile plastered on my face that felt like cracking porcelain. I hugged Leo. I shook hands with his friends' parents. I accepted congratulations on his behalf. Every laugh, every cheerful comment was a knife twisting in the wound Helen had just carved into me. Clara must have sensed something was wrong. She kept shooting me worried looks from across the lawn. Dad, are you okay? She asked, cornering me by the grill. You look pale. Just a bit overwhelmed, sweetie, I lied, forcing another smile. It's a big day. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not on one of the happiest days of her son's life. I couldn't let Helen's poison seep into their joy. That was a burden I would carry alone, for now. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, a new, younger man I didn't recognize approached Helen. He was handsome in a slick, rehearsed way, with expensive shoes and a watch that glittered in the fading sunlight. He put his arm around her familiarly. Mom, Aunt Carol is looking for you, he said, his voice smooth. Mom. The word hit me like a physical shock. This was him. This was Julian. He was here, at my home, at the party paid for with money that should have been building my grandson's future, a future he had stolen. He looked me up and down with a dismissive glance, a small, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He was the foil to Leo's earnest goodness, a walking embodiment of entitlement. He saw me not as a man, but as an obstacle that had been overcome, an old fool easily parted from his money. The rage inside me, which had been a hot, roaring fire, cooled into something far more dangerous, solid steel. After the last guest had gone and Clara and her family had departed, promising to help clean up tomorrow, the house fell into a deep, tomb-like silence. I found Helen in our bedroom, a suitcase open on the bed. She was crying, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "Robert, please," she began. "Let's not be hasty. We're a family." "You and I are not a family," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "A family doesn't steal from a child. I want you gone, now." Her face hardened. "Fine, but you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'm entitled to half of everything. This house, your business, your savings, everything." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. She had stolen a fortune from me, and now she was threatening to take the rest. "Get out," I repeated, pointing to the door. She snatched her suitcase, shot me a look of pure venom, and stormed out. I listened to her car start and speed away down the street. I stood alone in the quiet house that no longer felt like my own. It was her house now, filled with her sterile furniture and the ghost of her betrayal. I walked into my office, a small room where I kept my business records and personal mementos. On the wall was a framed photo of Sarah, taken on a hiking trip years ago. She was smiling, her face full of life and honest love. I looked at her, and the tears I had been holding back finally came. They weren't tears of sadness for my broken marriage, but tears of grief for my own stupidity, for the trust I had so foolishly given away. I sank into my chair and looked at my desk. The family computer sat there, a sleek machine Helen had insisted we buy. She used it constantly for her charity work. A thought, cold and clear, cut through my grief. She was arrogant. She was overconfident. People like that get sloppy. I spent the next hour in a state of focused calm. I moved out of our shared bedroom and into the guest room, a small Spartan space that felt more honest. I packed a small bag, not to leave, but to be ready to. This was my house, the one I had shared with Sarah, the one I had raised Clara in. I would not be driven from it. Not yet. The physical separation was happening within its walls. I was drawing a line, creating a territory of my own. Then, I sat down at the computer. I wasn't a tech wizard, but I knew the basics. I started by looking at the browser history. Page after page of real estate listings in another state, luxury car websites, designer clothing stores. It was a digital map of my stolen money. Then I went into the email account. It was mostly junk and correspondence related to her social life. But I remembered she was always talking about keeping things clean, deleting unnecessary files. I downloaded a simple file recovery program, one I'd used once to retrieve some deleted photos for Clara. I ran the scan on the trash folder in the hard drive's free space. It took over an hour. I sat there, nursing a cold cup of coffee, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Then, the scan finished. A list of recovered files appeared. Most were junk, fragmented data, but then I saw it. A folder labeled J Updates. My heart began to pound. I clicked it. Inside were dozens of deleted emails, emails between Helen and Julian. I opened the first one. My blood ran cold. It was dated 2 years ago. "Mom," it read, "the plan is working. The old man hasn't suspected a thing. That first transfer came through. Time to start living a little." I clicked through them, one after another. They were a detailed chronicle of their conspiracy. They called me the carpenter or the old fool. They discussed how to best manipulate me, how Helen should feign interest in my boring life to keep me docile. They talked about the college fund, calling it the Golden Goose. "He just keeps putting money in," Julian wrote in one. "It's like he's printing it for us. Make sure you keep him happy. Maybe pretend to like that awful grandson of his for an afternoon." Helen's replies were just as damning. "Don't worry, darling. He's completely under my spell. He trusts me implicitly. He thinks I'm managing his precious little fund, making it grow. The irony is delicious. By the time Leo is ready for college, the well will be dry, and you will have the life you deserve." I felt a wave of nausea so profound, I had to grip the sides of the desk. This wasn't a desperate mother making a bad choice. This was a cold, calculated long-term fraud. They had mocked me. They had mocked my love for my grandson. They had laughed at my work, my life, my trust. The pain was immense, a physical weight in my chest. But as I read on, that pain began to transform. It crystallized. It hardened into a single diamond-hard point of purpose. The final email was the most galling. It was from just a week before the graduation. "It's almost all transferred, Mom," Julian wrote, "just in time for the big day. It'll be funny, watching him graduate, knowing his whole future is sitting in my bank account. Don't let the old man get sentimental and try to access the account. Stall him. Once the last bit is clear, we're golden." That was it. The solidification of my resolve. My grief and humiliation burned away, leaving behind a cold, righteous fury. This was no longer just about getting the money back. This was about justice. It was about dismantling the web of lies they had so carefully spun. It was about showing Helen and her arrogant son what a quiet, underestimated carpenter was capable of when you threatened his family. I methodically began printing every single email, the hum of the printer, the only sound in the silent house. Each page that slid out was another nail for their coffin. My quiet decision in the kitchen had been an emotional reaction. This was different. This was a declaration of war. The next morning, I called Clara. I kept my voice steady, betraying none of the seismic shifts that had occurred within me over the past 12 hours. "Clara, honey, I need you to do something for me. Don't ask why just yet. I need you to take Leo out for the day. Go to the city, see a museum, have a nice lunch, my treat. I need the house to myself to deal with something." There was a pause. "Dad, what's wrong? You sound strange." "Everything is going to be fine," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. "I promise I will explain everything tonight. Just trust me." "Okay, Dad," she said, her voice laced with concern. "We'll go. Call me if you need anything." After she hung up, I made my second call. I looked up a name I had gotten from a contractor friend years ago, a lawyer who had helped him with a particularly nasty contract dispute. He was described as quiet, methodical, and an absolute shark when it came to financials. His name was Arthur Vance. His office was in an old, respectable brick building downtown, filled with dark wood and the smell of old books. It was a place of substance, of permanence. Arthur himself was a man in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He didn't say much at first. He just listened, his hands steepled under his chin as I laid out the entire story, from my marriage to Helen, to the discovery in the kitchen, to the emails I had found. I pushed the stack of printed pages across his polished mahogany desk. He picked up the first page and began to read. He read every single one, his expression unchanging. The silence stretched, filled only by the rustle of paper. When he was finished, he stacked them neatly and looked at me. "This is comprehensive," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "She didn't just make a withdrawal, Mr. Evans. She executed a systematic, multi-year campaign of fraud and embezzlement against you." "I know," I said. "The money for my grandson's education was over $500,000. The emails mention other transfers as well. I don't even know the total damage yet. She threatened me with divorce, said she'd take half of what's left." Arthur allowed himself a small, grim smile. "I don't think she will be in a position to take anything, Robert. May I call you Robert?" "Please." "Robert, what she has done is not just grounds for an incredibly one-sided divorce settlement. This is criminal, wire fraud, embezzlement. The district attorney would be very interested in these documents." "I don't want to send her to prison," I said, and it was true. My rage was cold, not hot. I didn't want vengeance in that way. I wanted justice. I wanted restitution. I wanted her to understand the gravity of what she had done, and I wanted her stripped of the power she had used to harm my family. I want the money back, every single cent, and I want her out of my life, with nothing. "A worthy and achievable goal," Arthur said, nodding. "We will operate on two fronts. The first is the divorce proceeding. We will file immediately, on grounds of fraud. This will freeze all known marital assets. The second, and more delicate, is the recovery of the funds from her son, Julian." He tapped the emails. "This is our leverage. The threat of criminal prosecution is a powerful motivator. Thus began my new life as an investigator. Arthur and his team filed the divorce papers that very afternoon. Helen was served the next day. I received a furious, hysterical phone call from her. "How dare you, after everything I did for you, turning that dusty old house into something respectable? You will regret this, Robert." I said nothing. I just listened until she ran out of steam. Then I said, "Speak to my lawyer from now on, Helen," and hung up. I changed the locks on the house that day. The physical separation was now complete. My days fell into a new rhythm. I would wake up early, drink my coffee in the quiet solitude of the guest room, and then get to work. Arthur had given me a list of tasks. I spent hours upon hours poring over old bank statements, credit card bills, and tax returns from the last 7 years of my marriage. It was a painstaking, soul-crushing process. With the knowledge I now had, the history of our life together was rewritten in stark, brutal columns of figures. A $5,000 charge at a high-end boutique? That was for Julian's new wardrobe, a series of cash withdrawals, always just under the $10,000 reporting limit. That was his living expenses. The 10-week spa retreat she took for her exhaustion? That was her visiting him in the luxury apartment my money had rented. Each discovery was a fresh stab of betrayal, but it also fueled my mission. I highlighted every suspicious transaction, cross-referencing them with the dates on the emails. I was building a fortress of evidence, brick by painful brick. Clara, bless her heart, was my rock. That evening after my first meeting with Arthur, I sat her and Mark down and told them everything. I laid it all out. The theft, the secret son, the years of deception. Clara's face went from shock to heartbreak, to a steely anger that mirrored my own. "That woman," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "That monster, living in our house, pretending to be part of our family." Mark put a protective arm around her, his own face a mask of disbelief. Leo was in the other room, so he didn't hear the details, but Clara and I agreed we had to tell him something. We sat him down the next day. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the full, sordid truth of Helen's betrayal. That would be too cruel. So I gave him a sanitized version. "Leo," I started, my heart aching. "There's been a problem with the college fund, a serious financial issue. It seems the money isn't there right now." His face fell. The light in his eyes, the one that dreamed of stars, dimmed. "What? But how? I thought it was safe." "I thought so too," I said, my voice thick. "And I am so sorry. But I need you to listen to me. This is my mistake, and I am going to fix it. You are going to go to that university. I promise you that. It might just be a bit more complicated than we thought." He looked from my face to his mother's, saw our shared determination, and nodded slowly. "Okay, Grandpa, I trust you." That trust was the fuel I needed. It was a sacred vow. Arthur's team, meanwhile, was working on tracing the larger sums. They subpoenaed bank records and found the wire transfers, a clear, undeniable trail leading from the investment account I had shared with Helen directly to a bank account in the name of Julian Croft. They discovered he had used the money to purchase a new sports car, an expensive condominium, and had invested a portion in some high-risk startup that had already failed. He wasn't just living off the money, he was burning through it. One afternoon, driven by a need to see it with my own eyes, I drove to the address of the condominium Arthur's investigators had found. It was a sleek glass and steel building in the trendiest part of the city. I parked across the street and just watched. After about an hour, he appeared. It was Julian. He strode out of the lobby, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He tossed a set of keys to a valet who brought around a low-slung, dark blue sports car that snarled and rumbled like a caged beast. He got in, revved the engine unnecessarily loud, and sped off. Watching him, so full of arrogance, so confident in his stolen wealth, I felt no desire for violence. I just felt a profound, cold certainty. He was a child playing with fire, and he had no idea that the man he'd dismissed as an old fool was about to take the matches away. I took a picture of him in the car with my phone and sent it to Arthur. "Our boy is enjoying his ill-gotten gains," I texted. Arthur's reply was swift. "Not for long. Helen's lawyer has requested a formal mediation. She thinks she can negotiate. She has no idea what we have. This is our chance. The element of surprise was my greatest weapon. Helen, insulated by her own arrogance and narcissism, clearly believed this was a standard, messy divorce. She thought my claims about the money were an emotional outburst, something she could manage and dismiss. Her lawyer, likely fed a carefully curated story of a desperate mother helping a troubled son with a loan, would be walking into an ambush. We maintained absolute radio silence. We let her believe she was in control. We let her build her confidence, brick by brick, so that when we knocked it all down, the collapse would be absolute. The gathering of my power was complete. The time for quiet investigation was over. The time for confrontation had arrived. The mediation was scheduled to take place in a neutral, third-party legal office. The room itself was designed to be calming, with its beige walls, abstract art, and a long, polished conference table that reflected the grim faces around it. It felt like a room where futures were decided or dismantled. I arrived with Arthur a few minutes early. I was wearing a simple, dark suit, one I usually reserved for weddings and funerals. Today, it felt like it was for both. The wedding of my marriage to Helen, and the funeral of her life as she knew it. I was nervous, a tremor in my hands that I hid by clasping them tightly in my lap. But beneath the nerves was a bedrock of resolve. I looked at Arthur, who gave me a slight, reassuring nod. He had a single, thick leather briefcase with him. It sat on the table between us like a dormant bomb. Helen arrived precisely on time, sweeping into the room as if she were arriving at a gala. She was dressed in a sharp, dark gray power suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup immaculate. She was the picture of aggrieved sophistication. Behind her was her lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Peterson, and trailing him, to my surprise and disgust, was Julian. He was dressed in a suit that was too flashy, trying to project an aura of serious support, but his eyes held the same smug condescension I had seen outside his condo. His presence was a calculated move, meant to present a united front, to paint me as the unreasonable man attacking her loving family. They took their seats on the opposite side of the table. Helen refused to meet my eye. She directed a look of pure ice at Arthur, then spoke to the mediator, a calm, professional woman named Ms. Albright. "Thank you for seeing us, Ms. Albright," Helen began, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "I am hoping we can resolve this unfortunate matter quickly and amicably. My husband has had an emotional reaction to a private family matter, and I believe he has been poorly advised." Peterson, her lawyer, picked up the thread. "Indeed, my client, Mrs. Evans, is prepared to be generous. Despite Mr. Evans's baseless and defamatory accusations, she is willing to agree to a standard division of assets, 50-50. We believe this is more than fair, given her contributions to the marriage and the emotional distress his recent actions have caused her." I felt a surge of hot anger, but I remembered Arthur's instruction. Let them talk. Let them build their own gallows. I remained silent, my face a stone mask. Miss Albright, the mediator, looked at my side of the table. "Mr. Vance, your response?" Arthur leaned forward slowly. He did not raise his voice. He spoke in the same calm, measured tone he had used in his office. "Ms. Albright, my client, Mr. Evans, has no interest in a standard division of assets, because this is not a standard situation. My client is not here to negotiate. He is here to inform Mrs. Evans of the consequences of her actions." Peterson chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Consequences? The only consequence I foresee is a long, expensive, and public divorce proceeding that will do Mr. Evans' reputation no good. His claims of theft are unsubstantiated and, frankly, slanderous." "Are they?" Arthur asked quietly. He reached down and opened his briefcase. The clicks of the latches were unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the room. He pulled out a thick, bound document and placed it gently on the table. "This is our preliminary filing. I'd like to draw your attention to a few key exhibits." He slid a copy across the table to Peterson, who picked it up with a look of mild annoyance. Helen glanced at it, then looked away, as if it were beneath her notice. Julian shifted in his chair, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Exhibit A, Arthur said, his voice a calm metronome. "A full accounting of the Kepler Future Fund, an investment account established by my client for the education of his grandson, Leo Clark. You will note the starting balance 18 years ago and the consistent weekly deposits made from Mr. Evans's personal business account for the subsequent 11 years. He paused, letting that sink in. You will then note the date the account was converted to a joint account with Mrs. Evans, and you will note the pattern of withdrawals that began 3 months later. Large sums, transferred out over a period of 5 years, totaling $521,450. Peterson was flipping through the pages, his confident demeanor beginning to fray at the edges. Helen's posture was a little stiffer. Exhibit B, Arthur continued, his voice unwavering. Sworn affidavits from the branch manager and a senior teller at the bank, confirming that all of these transfers were initiated solely by Mrs. Evans, often with instructions to ensure the transactions were kept discreet. Peterson's head snapped up. He looked at Helen, a question in his eyes. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent denial. Now, I imagine, Arthur said, his eyes fixed on Helen, that Mrs. Evans will claim, as she has to my client, that this was a loan to her son, a family matter. It was, Helen burst out, her voice sharp. It was a loan. My son was in trouble. Julian nodded beside her, putting on a solemn face. I was going to pay it all back, with interest. Yes. The son, Arthur said, as if just remembering. He pulled another set of documents from his briefcase. Exhibit C, a series of wire transfer confirmations from the joint investment account directly to a private checking account, an account in the name of one Mr. Julian Croft. He slid the transfer receipts across the table. Julian's face went pale. The name, his name, was there in black and white, next to sums of money so large they looked like typos. Peterson, the lawyer, was no longer looking confident. He was looking at his client with dawning horror. He had clearly been lied to. The power in the room had begun to shift. The air grew thick and heavy. It was like the moment before a lightning strike, when the ozone fills your lungs and the hair on your arms stands up. And finally, Arthur said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming even quieter, which made it all the more menacing. He pulled out the last stack of papers, the printed emails. Exhibit D, a collection of recovered electronic correspondence between Mrs. Evans and Mr. Croft spanning the last 2 years. In these emails, they discuss, in rather colorful detail, their plan to systematically drain the funds. They refer to my client as the carpenter and the old fool. They mock his grandson. They strategize about how best to conceal their activities. He didn't slide these across the table. He stood up, walked around, and placed the stack directly in front of Helen. I believe this is my favorite, he said, tapping the top page. The one where you call the irony of your deception delicious. Silence. A profound, absolute silence fell upon the room like a slab of granite. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. Helen stared at the printed email, at her own words staring back at her. The color drained from her face, leaving her expensive makeup looking like a grotesque mask on a bloodless canvas. Her carefully constructed world of lies and entitlement had just been demolished by a stack of simple white paper. Her lawyer, Peterson, looked from the emails to her face and back again. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated shock, mingled with the fury of a professional who has been made a fool of. Julian looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between his mother, Arthur, and the door, as if calculating his chances of escape. The dramatic power shift was complete. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, devastating implosion. In that moment, I was no longer the victim. I was the victor. And they were just beginning to understand the totality of their defeat. Helen's composure, the elegant facade she had worn like armor for years, finally shattered. It didn't just crack, it exploded. Her mouth opened and closed silently for a moment, like a fish gasping for air. Then, the denial began, frantic and incoherent. No, those aren't real, she stammered, her hand fluttering toward the stack of emails as if to sweep them away. You fabricated this. Robert, how could you? How could you create such disgusting lies? She turned her wild eyes on me, searching for the man she could manipulate, the man she thought she knew. She found a stranger. I just looked at her, my expression unchanging. I didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Peterson, her lawyer, finally found his voice. It was cold with fury. He spoke to Helen, his voice a low hiss. "Did you lie to me?" "No, of course not." "He's twisting everything," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch and hysteria. She turned to the mediator, Ms. Albright, her hands clasped in a desperate plea. "You can't believe this. It was a loan. I am a mother. I was helping my son. Is that a crime?" Ms. Albright's face was a study in professional neutrality, but her eyes were like chips of ice. "Mrs. Evans, conspiracy to commit fraud is, in fact, a crime, a very serious one." That was the final blow. The word crime hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. The reality of her situation finally seemed to penetrate her panic. Her denial collapsed into panicked pleading. "Robert, please," she begged, her voice now a pathetic whine. She reached a hand across the table toward me. "We can fix this. I'll get the money back. Julian will get a job. We'll pay you back, I swear it. Don't do this. Think of the years we had. Think of our life together." "Our life was a lie, Helen," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of finality. It was the first time I had spoken directly to her. "You didn't just steal money. You stole my trust. You conspired to steal a future from a boy who did nothing but love you. There is nothing to fix." Julian, seeing his mother's collapse and his own future circling the drain, made a foolish move. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Look, this is all a big misunderstanding," he said, trying for a tone of reasonable authority and failing miserably. "My mother was just trying to help. Maybe she went about it the wrong way, but her heart was in the right place." Arthur cut him off without even looking at him. "Sit down, Mr. Croft," he said, his tone dismissive. "You are a party to felony wire fraud. I would strongly advise you to remain silent until you have retained your own legal counsel. And for the record, your heart was in a new condominium and a six-figure sports car." Julian froze, then sank back into his chair, his face ashen. He finally understood that he was not just a witness here, he was a co-conspirator, and his assets, his entire lifestyle, were about to evaporate. Helen's pleading turned to rage. She launched herself to her feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. You sanctimonious old man, you and your precious grandson, you think you're so much better than me? I gave you a life. I made you respectable." "That's enough," Miss Albright said, her voice sharp and authoritative. She stood up, a clear signal that the proceedings were over. "Mr. Peterson, I suggest you have a private conversation with your client. This mediation is concluded. Given the evidence presented, I see no path forward for a settlement negotiation. This is now a matter for the courts, and potentially for the district attorney's office." The intervention of authority was absolute. Peterson, his face grim, grabbed Helen's arm. "Helen, we're leaving. Now." But she was beyond reason. She tried to pull away from him, her face contorted with a rage that was terrifying in its intensity. "I'm not going anywhere. He's not going to get away with this." "Mrs. Evans," Ms. Albright said, her voice dangerously calm, "if you do not leave my conference room immediately, I will have security escort you out." That was the final humiliation, the threat of being physically removed. Peterson, a strong man, practically had to drag her toward the door. She was still shouting, a stream of venom and vitriol directed at me. "You will regret this, Robert. I will ruin you." As they reached the door, she made one last, desperate attempt, her voice cracking with tears of pure rage and defeat. "I hate you. I hate you." And then they were gone. The door clicked shut, plunging the room back into silence. The aftermath was a profound, echoing quiet. Julian was left sitting at the table, abandoned by his mother and her lawyer, looking small and terrified. He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear, a silent plea for, what? Mercy? Understanding? I offered him nothing. I just held his gaze until he looked away, utterly defeated. After a moment, he scrambled to his feet and scurried out of the room without a word. The bomb had detonated. The fallout was just beginning. The silence that remained in the conference room was heavy, thick with the residue of the emotional explosion that had just occurred. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for the past hour for the past several weeks. My hands, which had been clenched into fists in my lap, slowly uncurled. The tremor was gone. Miss Albright looked at me and Arthur. "Gentlemen," she said with a sigh, "I've been mediating for 20 years. I have never seen a case of such calculated, malicious deception between spouses. Mr. Evans, I am truly sorry for what you have endured." "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice raspy. Arthur began to pack his briefcase, his movements neat and precise. "I believe we have achieved our primary objective for the day," he said with profound understatement. We walked out of the building and into the bright afternoon sun. The ordinary sounds of the city, the traffic, the distant sirens, people talking on the street, felt strange, like I was hearing them for the first time after a long illness. The world seemed sharper, more real. I drove straight to Clara's house. She must have been waiting by the window because the front door opened before I was even out of the car. She ran to me, her face a mask of anxiety. "Dad, what happened?" I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around my daughter, the one constant, true thing in my life, and held on tight. And then, the emotional dam I had built so carefully finally broke. The tears came, not the hot tears of rage or the cold tears of grief, but tears of pure, unadulterated relief. I sobbed into her shoulder like a child, all the tension, all the pain, all the fear of the last few weeks pouring out of me. She just held me, stroking my back, whispering, "It's okay, Dad, it's okay, you're home." Later that evening, sitting in Clara's warm, loving kitchen with her and Mark, I recounted the events of the mediation. I told them about Helen's breakdown, Julian's terror, and the irrefutable power of the evidence we had gathered. When I was done, Clara looked at me, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "I am so proud of you, Dad," she said. "I know how hard that must have been. You stood up to her. You fought for Leo. You fought for yourself." Just then, Leo came into the kitchen, drawn by our serious tones. "Is everything okay?" he asked. I looked at my grandson, at his hopeful, worried face. I smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached my eyes. "Everything is going to be more than okay, Leo," I said. "The problem with the college fund, I fixed it." The consequences for Helen and Julian were swift and devastating. As Arthur had predicted, Peterson dropped Helen as a client within hours of the mediation, citing that she had misrepresented the facts of her case. Faced with the mountain of evidence and the very real threat of criminal charges for fraud, Helen had no choice but to surrender completely. Her new court-appointed lawyer advised her to accept the settlement agreement Arthur drafted. It was brutal and absolute. She was forced to relinquish all claims to the house, my business, my pension, and any other marital assets. Her entire life with me was erased, financially. Furthermore, the agreement stipulated that she and Julian were legally obligated to repay the entirety of the stolen funds. To avoid prison, they had to liquidate everything. Julian's new condominium was sold. The snarling sports car was repossessed. His designer clothes, his expensive watches, his entire life built on my stolen money, it all went up in smoke. The funds recovered from the sales were transferred directly into a new, irrevocable trust I had set up, with Clara as the sole trustee and Leo as the beneficiary. It wasn't everything. Julian had burned through a significant amount, but it was the majority. And for the rest, a court-ordered lien was placed on any future earnings either Helen or Julian might ever make until every last cent was repaid. They were financially ruined and legally tethered to their betrayal for the foreseeable future. Their social ruin was just as complete. The story, in its broad strokes, spread through Helen's circle of friends. She was ostracized, a pariah. The woman who valued status and appearance above all else had lost everything. About a month after the mediation, I received one final desperate communication. It was a phone call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Robert?" The voice was thin, reedy, stripped of all its former confidence. It was Helen. I didn't say anything. "Robert, I'm so sorry," she said, and for the first time, I heard something that might have been genuine remorse, born of absolute desperation. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I lost everything. I'm living in a tiny apartment. Julian won't even speak to me. He blames me for everything. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. I was so insecure, so afraid of being nothing. I wanted to give him the life I never had. I listened to her pathetic confession, and I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The pain was gone. All that was left was a vast, empty space where my trust in her used to be. She was a stranger on the phone, telling me a sad story that had nothing to do with me anymore. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice calm. There was a pause, then a sob. "Can't we just talk?" "No, Helen," I said softly. "There's nothing left to say." I hung up the phone. I blocked the number. I walked over to the window and looked out at my backyard, at Sarah's roses blooming in the summer sun. I had closed the door on that chapter of my life, for good. Months passed. The house, which had once felt haunted by Helen's presence, slowly began to feel like my own again. I moved my things back into the master bedroom. I sold the sleek, uncomfortable furniture she had bought and filled the rooms with solid, comfortable pieces, some of which I built myself. The silence was no longer a weight. It was a peaceful companion. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to a crisp, golden autumn. One Saturday afternoon, the three of us, me, Clara, and Leo, were sitting around my sturdy oak kitchen table. The air was filled with the scent of the apple pie Clara had baked. Between us on the table lay an open letter. It was from the admissions office of Leo's dream university, confirming his enrollment, his dorm assignment, and his class schedule. His first tuition payment, sent from the new trust fund, had been received. Leo was beaming, his face alive with an excitement that was beautiful to behold. "Introduction to Stellar Astrophysics," he read aloud, his voice full of wonder. "I can't believe it's real." "Believe it, kiddo," I said, my heart full. "You earned it." He looked up from the letter, his expression turning serious. He looked at me, his eyes clear and direct. "Grandpa, Mom told me more about what happened. With Helen, with the money." I felt a pang of apprehension, but I met his gaze. "She did?" "Yeah," he said, nodding slowly. I wanted to say thank you, not just for the money, but for fighting for me, for not giving up." I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "Leo, there was never any question of giving up. That's what family does. We fight for each other." In that moment, sitting in the warm kitchen, surrounded by the only two people in the world who mattered, I felt a sense of peace so profound, it was almost overwhelming. It was the quiet victory I had sought. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about this. It was about the restoration of order, the reaffirmation of love and loyalty over deceit and greed. I had been a fool. I had let my loneliness blind me to the truth of the woman I married. I had mistaken her glossy exterior for substance, her practiced affection for genuine love. My tolerance, my patience, my desire to see the good in people. She had seen these things not as virtues, but as weaknesses to be exploited. It was a harsh lesson, and one that had cost me dearly, but it was a lesson I had needed to learn. I learned that true strength isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about the quiet resolve to do what is right, no matter how difficult. It's about the methodical, patient work of laying one brick of evidence upon another until you have built an unbreachable fortress of truth. I, the quiet carpenter, had been underestimated. And in the end, I had used my own quiet, methodical nature to dismantle the life of the woman who thought me a fool. Looking at Leo, his future bright and limitless before him, I knew I had done the right thing. The battle had been ugly, but the peace it had won was priceless. Family isn't just a word you say at a wedding or a party. It isn't a performance you put on for the benefit of others. It's a promise to protect, to support, and to cherish. It's a trust you earn every single day, and a future you build together with honest hands and a true heart, not one you steal in the dead of night. I had kept my promise, and my grandson was on his way to the stars.